The reason I say I'm not working on a book, I do have a book that I have an idea for, and I'm like 2 chapters into it, but I wrote those 2 chapters 6 months ago. And I think about it a lot. I talk about it a lot. I plan it. I'm not writing every day. And if I was truly, so this is a lesson, right? I'm not writing every day. Therefore, I'm not writing a book. If you're not analyzing deals every day and making offers and talking with real estate agents and going to meetups every single day or every single week, and you have the process for that, if you're not doing that, you're not a real estate investor.
Wow.
You're a wannabe. You're a wisher.
Everything is possible. Just hustle. Just hustle.
The $1 Million Hustle Podcast, where we keep it real, unstated entrepreneurship wisdom. Learn to think like a millionaire and hustle like you're broke. Here's your host, Billy the Kid, aka Billionaire.
Everything is possible. Just hustle. Just hustle. Everything is possible. Just hustle.
Welcome to the $1 Million Hustle Podcast, baby. It is your boy Billy the Kid, aka BDK, aka Billionaire in this mug. And guys, you are in the right show if you're ready to learn how to think like a millionaire and hustle like you're broke. When I say think like a millionaire, guys, it is not a financial thing. It is a mental thing. What is the person that you need to become in order for you to get to that milestone, to get to your $1 Million hustle? What are the things that you have to do in order for you to get there? And that is what you're going to learn in this show. We bring you real-time millionaires, real multi-millionaires, people that are billionaires, right? Like on their way to become billionaires. What did they do in order for them to just hit that $1 Million hustle? And guys, the thing is, not even just $1 million. Like, what does it take for you to make $250, $500K? That's what we're trying to find out in this show. So you're in the right spot if you're ready to learn how to think like that. You have to become a whole other person. It is for the 3% action takers, guys. So if you're in the 97%, please do not hit play on this podcast, plain and simple. Wow. The podcast, the interview I just did, guys, shout out to Brandon Turner. Those of you who don't know, you've been living under a rock. He was the host of the Biggerpockets show, and now he's just doing massive things. He's doing syndications. He gave some great announcements here about some future projects that, I'll wait for you guys to listen. But we talked about how, most people, guys, want things now, right? Like they're not willing to put in the 10 years that it takes for you to build something. And we talked about that, and it was crazy how he mentioned how, the first 10 years where he bought his first few rentals and he was out there painting, doing the stuff himself, right? And then it went from that to the 10 years he did at Biggerpockets. And then the point is, he has been hustling. He has been doing his thing. So now all of a sudden, quote unquote, right? Like it looks easier. And I kept saying that throughout the show to make a point that it is not easy, guys. It's simple, but it's not easy. You have to put in the work, and throughout his story, you're going to hear that. So I can't wait to dive in. Make sure you guys grab a copy of my book, The Power of Being Uncomfortable, at BillyTheKid.com. I'm actually going to autograph it and mail it to you if you get it at BillyTheKid.com. If you don't want it autographed, shame on you. But you could grab it at Amazon. You could grab it at BarnesandNoble.com. Anywhere else books are available. Actually, the audio version, guys, go to Audible and download the audio version. I've gotten so many great feedback off of the audio version. I am an artist. I do music, so I had to do something a little different with the audio book. So go check it out if you haven't. And other than that, follow my music on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, anywhere music is available. But if you don't do any of those things, at least subscribe to this channel, guys. Subscribe to my YouTube. This is where I'm going to be bringing you everything music, podcasting. I do vlogs. Like, go check out everything I got on there. And make sure you leave us a 5-star review if you feel like we are a 5-star review show. If you don't, please don't. Otherwise, leave us a review, leave us a comment, and let us know how can we get better, guys. I'm hustling to inspire. That's my whole way of thinking nowadays. So I need to know, how can I serve you? How can I be better to help you out? Shout out to everybody in my mastermind, the Get Uncomfortable Mastermind. They have been killing it. And if you haven't yet, there's testimonials on my YouTube channel. Wow. Just shout out to everybody in there. If you're ready to level up and take your life to the next level, if you're looking for accountability, hit me up, info@billythekid.com with your story so we can see if you're a good fit for the Get Uncomfortable Mastermind. And also, I'm doing one-on-one coaching. I only do a couple at a time just so I can pour into people the right way. And I don't know how long I'm going to be doing that for, but take advantage. As of right now, I am doing it, but this could change later. So hit me up for that, info@billythekid.com. But with that being said, guys, again, I'm just ready to dive in. And if you've been wondering what's up with Biggerpockets and Brandon, we talked about that. Literally, this was an amazing show. He over-delivered more than expected, honestly. And that's just Brandon Turner. Such a great guy, positive dude, man. And you could tell that he's literally become that person, right? Like, it didn't happen overnight. Like, he's put in the work, and you could just feel it. Even though it's digital, you could just feel it through this, right? Like, you could feel it every time on social media. I'm sure if those of you who follow him, you could feel it every time, just because he's just a genuine dude, being authentic, being himself. And honestly, those of you who are listening, if you're not being yourself, if you're not being authentic, unfortunately, it's not going to work until you are. So, but enough of that, guys. I am ready for you guys to listen to this interview. So here is Brandon Turner. Vámonos. Welcome to the $1 Million Hustle Podcast, baby, where you, my friend, are going to learn to think like a millionaire and hustle like you're broke. It is your boy, Billy the Kid. I am super excited today because, as you know, this show is teaching you the mentality. Like, what do you need to think? How do you need to act? What do you need to do in order for you to get to that $1 million hustle, right? And above that, we have a lot of listeners that are multis. And I mean, today alone, we have somebody who's very close to just being the next billionaire, we'll call it. Brandon Turner, how you doing, man?
Dude, thank you. This is awesome. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. I'm a big fan, man. You crush it online. You crush it in the world of everything you put your mind to. Actually, it's kind of crazy. We can do a whole podcast on you, but yeah, man, I'm excited.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for taking your time, Brendan. I'm pumped. I got a lot of different questions I want to ask you, and I'm gonna just jump right in if you don't mind. If you could just the quickest bio that you could give us of where you're from and your whole Washington experience now to Hawaii.
Sure, man. It was a dark and stormy night back in 1985 when my mother gave birth. No, let's see. I'll fast forward a few years. I went to college. I got a history major. In the middle of that process, I bought a house. I was going to go to law school because you can't do anything with a history major except for go to law school. So I was going to go to law school, and then I bought a house and I made like 20 grand by selling it, like over a 6-month period, just because like I bought it and sold it, and it was a rough fix up thing. And I was like, holy crap, this is way better than anything else. So that was kind of like entry of phase one of my kind of journey. I call phase one was like, I discovered real estate investing. I started buying properties. My wife and I would fix them up, do all this stuff. And that was all in Western Washington. So I grew up in Minnesota, college, met my girl, moved to Washington, got married. And then we just, for a decade, roughly, maybe a little less, we just like bought little crappy duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, single family houses, did some flipping, did all the work ourselves, managed the tenants, found tenants, fixed toilets, all that stuff. So phase one was like I was in it, like as a landlord, as a flipper, just figuring out the business, reading books, trying to network, all that good stuff. And then at some point, I kind of graduated to like financial freedom, which led me to phase two. I still kind of continued on phase one, even up until today, but I kind of added on phase two, which was joining Biggerpockets. And I started the Biggerpockets podcast alongside Josh Dorkin, and that blew up and did really well for a decade. So from like up until last year, I mean, a year ago now is when I stepped out of that role, because the third phase had started, which is the commercial real estate side of my life, which was we started buying mobile home parks and apartments, and that blew up really big. So now we own 75, 76, I don't know, something like that, 100 units. And which led to phase four, which I just recently started, which is kind of a more of a charity driven approach, which is we have a tribe called the Better Life Tribe, and we have 1,000 people paying to better their life. And as part of that, all the profits go to charity. So phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. There you go. That's my line in a nutshell.
That's probably the fastest bio you've ever done, huh?
I think so.
Got it down.
I'm getting better at nailing those down.
And it's so crazy. Do you think there's something to that, Brendan? I couldn't help but think like, okay, the first 10 years was this, and then the second phase, 10 years. And then do you think there's like something to that that leads you to that success?
I love that you asked that question. Every successful entrepreneur I ever know who just was like an overnight success, they actually had, it's almost always the same thing. They had 10 years of hustle or hard work, right? There's always like this 10-year number. That's very interesting, right? Yeah, I was in real estate for 10 years before I really felt like I was making money. I mean, I was making money, but I would spend money and then I'd buy rentals and I'd have to replace a roof and I'd lose all the cash flow. And it took 10 years to get I literally was 10 years almost to like the year or to the month even where I crossed the $1 million mark from where I started. It took a decade to get $1 million. And then Biggerpockets, I did for a decade. And then, there's some overlap in there. So I'm not like 100 years old here, but, and then, Open Door Capital now, I've been at it for 4.5 years, 5 years. And, that took off a lot quicker. Yeah, it's been, I know, isn't that crazy? Time flies. It's been, I think 4 years ago is when I officially was like, let's buy our first deal. But yeah, I mean, like we want to buy we have a 10-year goal to buy $10 billion of real estate. So I'll look back right now we have a little less than $1 billion. So I got 10 times to go still in the next 5 years, but I'll do it. And then we'll look back and be like, dang, that was a big decade. So yeah, there's some truth to like overnight success takes 10 years.
Yeah.
It's like the old quote, right? You go bankrupt very slowly and then all at once. And I love that phrase, right? Like your marriage falls apart very slowly and then all at once. Your kid grows up very slowly and then all at once. It's like things take a long time. So, just knowing that perspective is such a millionaire mindset, that idea. You will have to hustle for a lot longer than you probably think you will. But then someday you wake up and look and you're like, oh, shoot, I'm a millionaire. And it happens all at once.
Yeah. And it goes along with those 10,000 hours, right? I love that. Love it. And so I'm going to ask you this question. I know you hang around some magnificent people. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever heard in your whole life?
I had a guy once tell me, he was a consultant that came in for Biggerpockets, or kind of like a board member, director, whatever, wicked smart guy, business guy. And he had said to us, we were telling him about all the things we had. We got this many developers, like web developers. We have this much money in the bank. We have this much this. We have this much this. And here's what we're going to do with it. And after a little while, he finally holds up his hand and he says a few words that just changed my life forever. He said, guys, stop telling me what you have and what you're going to do with it. Tell me what's possible. And then let's just back into what you need to get there. And it was such a simple concept, but so mind-blowing, because people often look and say, this is how much cash I have. Therefore, this is the size of rental property I could buy. Or I have this much experience. Therefore, this is what I can build as an entrepreneur. But what if instead we said, what's possible here? Like what's crazy, but still like possible? And it's like, well, building this blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Now that we've had that set as a goal, now let's back into how we're going to get there. Who do we need to bring into the picture? How are we going to walk from where we are today to get to that point? And it's a mindset that I see a lot of really successful people actually adopt, is they start from vision. They don't start from capacity or what they currently are holding.
Wow. I love that. And with that being said, I want to ask you, what is your best piece of advice that you could give anybody out there listening, and myself?
Yeah. So my best advice would be this: for anybody who wants to build a business, entrepreneurship, real estate investing, whatever, number one best advice I can give people is that everything that you want to achieve is simply a series of little tiny steps. And once we learn to recognize that, like, it's not big things. It never is. It's a series of little tiny, usually 5-minute steps. So you want to improve your marriage. You want to get in better health. You want to make $1 million. You want to buy a big real estate portfolio. Just break down, what does that actually look like in terms of my next step? It's usually a 5-minute thing. I mean, just to give a tangible example, you want to have financial freedom down the road. You want $1 million a year in passive income 10 years from now. Okay, well, that's a big goal. That gets overwhelming. People are like, well, someday I'd like to have $1 million, right? Okay. let's scale it down to like what do we got to do next? Well, we got to buy a rental property. You've never bought one before. Okay, fine. We got to buy, let's say, a duplex. Okay, what do you got to do that next? Well, I got to find an agent. No, what do you got to do? Like zoom in more. Well, I gotta post on my Facebook that I'm looking for an agent and ask my family and friends for recommendations. So you're telling me that your goal of $1 million a year in passive income is being held up by a 30-second task that you can do on your phone involving Facebook and making a post, right? Like all of the success and the dream and the ambition that we have all can be boiled down to a task that will take less than 5 minutes to do, and you could do it right now. And once people get that concept in their head, that we get the results of what we repeatedly do. Once you get that in your head and you just start doing the actions, the results will just happen automatically. Now, it won't happen right now, right? Again, it's that idea of, it goes slow until it goes fast, but it does compound in itself. It compounds and gets bigger and bigger like a giant snowball. And someday you wake up and you're a completely different person with the life that you only dreamed of before.
Wow. And, it makes me think of this analogy that I read somewhere, and it was basically about how, and it was about something else, another business, but I put it in like a real estate perspective. I was like, okay, so it's like cooking something that you've never cooked before. But when you go to, when you go to the store, you buy the ingredients, you might be lost a little bit and go over the list of what you need. Right. And so it's not easy at the beginning. Right. So until you do that meal over and over and over again, and it's like the first deal that you got to find, it's like, just get uncomfortable and do it, right? Like I don't know, that's kind of what I just heard right now.
Very much
with the little things.
It is little things. And you know what? The first time you do it, you're not going to make, like, let's use real estate as an example. The first time you buy a rental property, you probably won't make money. That's a hard truth to accept, but most people, that's true. The first time you buy a property, it probably won't make money because you don't know what you don't know yet. And on the alternative is if you just always are like, well, I got to do the perfect deal, you'll never buy anything. So the in-between is just recognize that you're going to make mistakes, get advice from people, ask for help, reach out to people who are better than smarter than you at that task. Hopefully you do make some money. But you know what? The first deal is not about making money. The first deal is about gaining the confidence and the clarity and the wisdom and the knowledge and the excitement and the passion and the momentum that's going to take you to the second deal and the third deal and the fifth and the 10th and the 100th. Wealth is not built in a property. It's built through a portfolio, and it's built through a portfolio over time. So at least when it comes to real estate, it takes time. So you've got to develop the skill set and the networking, the connections, the knowledge, and all that stuff that I just listed. You got to develop that. And the only way you develop that is by doing deals. So do deals, and hopefully you make a little bit of money along the way.
Take action. And I want to ask you this, because we've talked about the decades and kind of where you're at now. It's like, we'll say easier, quote unquote, those of you who aren't watching, because it's not easy, but it's simple, but it's not easy. It's easier to look back and say, oh, wow, right? Like where you're at now. What was the patience like during those, like, we'll call them 30 years, 25, 30 years? How did you deal with patience knowing that you would end up where you're at now?
Yeah, man. I mean, really, and it's been less than that if you think about it, like, because there's so much overlap, right? So I started at 20, I'm 37 today. So it's been 17 years of, like, it took a long time to get there. I remember thinking multiple times back in like my late 20s, like, does this rental property thing ever actually work? Like, I know in theory it does, but it goes so slow. And like I said, like in the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. So I bought a lot of deals that at the end of the day didn't make cash flow. See, one of the biggest misconceptions in real rental property investing is that, like, when you analyze a deal, that you're going to make a bunch of cash flow. And the reality is it gets eaten up very quickly by occasional expenses. So like you might make $500 a month and then make 500, then make 400, then make 600, then make 300, then make 500. And you're like, hey, I'm doing pretty good. And then boom, you're hit with a $32,000 roof. Well, that just wiped out 5 years of your cash flow. And so that's why I teach a lot. One of the number one things I teach and talk about all the time is this concept of pure cash flow. Like, when you say cash flow, people are usually looking at like mortgage, rent minus mortgage minus insurance and taxes. But there's some occasional expenses that pop up, and you got to account for those things on average over time. And so, water heater's $8 a month, or a new roof is, $55 a month, or whatever it is. You just got to know that several $100s every single month is going to go out, even if you don't see it go out right now. It's going to go out every few years. and there's always a new thing that needs to be replaced. So that said, real estate's a very forgiving asset class. So if you hold on long enough, all those properties in my beginning that I was like, that I didn't actually make that much cash flow from, I made hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, when I sold them. Because over time, real estate just tends to go up in value and the mortgages tend to get paid down. That's how math works. And like you end up with just a lot more wealth. So yeah, so there's the patient side. I needed to keep that in mind all the time, is I know this works. I just need to stick with it long enough. And it does compound, but it is hard to be patient sometimes. It's hard to remember like, oh, another, late night with this crappy tenant. Another, late night fixing up a rental unit. Like those things do get better and your systems get better. And if you can just power through that stuff, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, you're gonna look back and have a completely different future because of that.
Wow, I love it. And it's funny you said like the whole tenant thing. To me, it's always like, at least if I own a management company, and so I do hear that's where I'm at right now, right? Like my first decade of all that, and it's funny. You do like the best comparison that I could do to with a tenant, it's like a marriage, right? Because at the end, it's like, are we gonna be good when we divorce? Like, are you gonna be mad? Are you gonna, But anyways, and so you mentioned wealth, Brandon, and I feel like there's this misconception in the whole real estate world of to me, it's like if you want to get rich, you could flip houses. If you want to get wealthy, keep them. What's your, like, can you elaborate your thoughts on those two? Because you hear that a lot. And the thing is, those of you who are listening, I don't think there's like a wrong way of doing things. Like if you find just do the flip. If you find, just get it done, right? Like take action. So what are your thoughts on that?
One of the most life-changing stories I ever heard early in my kind of career of trying to build wealth was from the book Cash Flow Quadrant. And Robert Kiyosaki in that book tells a story of a town that ran out of water, and they needed to hire somebody to go get them water. And so they hire these 2 contractors and they say, can you go get us water? And the first one says, no problem. He grabs 2 buckets and he walks down to the river 7 miles away, fills them up, comes back, dumps them in the town pond or whatever. And now the town's got some water for the day. And then he goes back and does a second trip. And then every day he's hauling these buckets every day. And pretty soon he gets his kids involved and they're hauling buckets. And now he's got to take, the town's thirsty. So now instead of 2 buckets, he's taking 4, then 6. And he's got this big bar across his back because he's carrying these 6 buckets. And he's just doing it. Meanwhile, the second contractor they hired just disappears. No one knows what happened to her. She's just gone. And so anyway, meanwhile, every day this guy's hauling buckets. You know what? Everyone's cheering him on. Like, yeah, it's the guy with all the water. Yeah, he's bringing water. He's getting a lot of accolades because he's bringing water. And then, maybe a year later, the second contractor, the woman that they hired, shows up in town and she puts the final turn, the final crank on the pipeline she had been building. And she turns a spigot and cold, clean water just flows out. And she sits down in the shade and drinks a glass of cold water. And for the rest of that town's existence, they just have cold water flowing. And the question is then is what we're doing, is what you're doing, building a pipeline, or are you hauling buckets? Now, when I look at like house flipping is a great business. It's a great model. And there are ways to make it more of a pipeline. But at the end of the day, when you flip houses, you're carrying buckets the same way you are at a job. Now, it's a way better job than working at, Starbucks probably, but it is still carrying buckets. And so what I would encourage people to ask themselves is, how can we turn what I'm doing into either how can we turn it into a pipeline that delivers cold, clean water, or how do we build a pipeline on the nights and weekends or on the side, or how can we just start thinking pipeline, not bucket? And that concept has stuck with me now for almost 20 years and completely changed my life and made me millions of dollars. Wow. Yeah, no. And it's so true, because it's like, once that flip is done, you're on to the next one and and it's never ending. Right. So yeah, I keep forgetting Cash Flow. Such a great book. It's so good. Actually, with that being said, Brendan, I know you're definitely a reader, and all the years of me listening to you, you made it to my list with all your books and all the books out there that you've mentioned. But I want to ask you this: what is one book that like changed your life completely, whether it's an old one or a newer one? I know it's a tough question because you hang around with authors too, and you're an author yourself. But what's that one book? Yo, we'll be right back to this great episode of the $1 Million Hustle Podcast. Before we continue, I want you to go grab a copy of my book, The Power of Being Uncomfortable. It is out on
Amazon. It is out on Barnes & Noble, Walmart.com, Target.com, and everywhere else books are available. The great news, guys, is you could go to BillyTheKid.com and grab an autographed copy. That is right. I'm going to mail you an autographed copy right now. Audiobook is also available on Audible and everywhere else audiobooks are available. So go listen to it. Go grab yourself an autographed copy. And I'll see you on the other side, baby. And now back to this great episode of the $1 Million Hustle Podcast.
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is a big influence on me. There's the E-Myth Revisited from Michael Gerber. But I'll throw out the book The One Thing from Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. That was really the book that introduced this concept of what they call goal setting to the now, which is where you might have a 10-year goal. Well, what do you got to do to be on track for it this year? And then now you got a 1-year goal. What do you got to do to be on track for the quarter? Well, now you got a quarterly goal. Okay, to be on track for your quarterly goal, what do you got to do this week? Okay, great. Now you got a weekly goal. Okay, to hit that by the end of the week, what do I got to do today? Now I got a today goal. All right, to be on track for my today goal, what do I have to do now? That concept changed my life in so many ways. And so it really gave me the framework of how I operate all my businesses today, very much as in the idea of goal setting to the now.
Wow. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. And so to kind of introduce this question, you either get paid for the decisions you made years ago or you pay for the decisions you made years ago, right? Choice is yours. And you clearly have made some great decisions. So are you the kind of guy, Brendan, that like wakes up in the morning and knows how massively successful you are? And then a second part to that is whether yes or no, how does that affect where you are and where you could be?
Oh, man, good question. I mean, I have a lot of confidence in myself because I know I've put in the work. I know I've put in the 10 plus years, the 10,000 hours. And so I have a tremendous amount of confidence and what do we call it? Like a mindset around money, a very abundant mindset. So it's not that I think of myself as like, oh, look at how fabulously rich I am. I mean, I would love to have more money. I feel like there's never enough. And that's a personality fault that I know a lot of people struggle with. I don't know if I'll ever get over it. Like I could have $1 billion in the bank and I'd be like, oh, sure would be nice to have a little bit more. Something could go wrong. And at the end of the day, I don't want to end up living back in the alley in Aberdeen, Washington in my little duplex. Like that terrifies me. So I think that the drive for money and the feel of enough is hard to accomplish. That said, it's not like it paralyzes me or really makes me that worried. I definitely, it definitely is there. So yeah, instead I just say like, I feel very in the zone when it comes to business and growth because I've put in the 10,000 hours. I probably got 10,000 hours in just reading business books. Like I get business. I'm not perfect and there's a million things I can still learn. But yeah, when you start operating in your zone of what do you want to call it? Like the zone of excellence because you put in the hours, you can just feel like it's like a skateboarder just on a skateboard at the park. He just feels good. He's in the zone. He knows how to do it. It's a rapper who's been rapping for 10,000 hours and he can just lay down something I could never do. Right. So I feel that way when it comes to making money right now. I'm a skateboarder at the skate park who's been skating for 20 years. I can lay down.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's massive. And it's just crazy. So it seems like it was easier. And again, I keep saying that because obviously where you're at, but when you made that choice to move to Hawaii, like, can you talk about how uncomfortable that was and just the mindset at that time? Because I'm sure you've grown since. Obviously, we grow every day, right? When you read that many books. So what was it like then?
Yeah, two fun stories about moving to Hawaii. So the first one was that I had this buddy who I met at a kid's birthday party when I lived in Washington. His name's Jared. He's awesome. And Jared was like, I'd never met him before. He's a buddy now, but I'd never met him before. So I'm sitting next to him at this kid's birthday party. All the kids are, running around opening gifts. And me and him are just awkwardly sitting there talking like two grown-ups do at birthday parties. And he says, I actually live in Hawaii. And I'm like, you live in Hawaii? Like, you were born and raised? He's like, no, I just moved there a few years ago. And I'm like, whoa. You moved to Hawaii? Like, you can just move to Hawaii? That's a thing? He's like, yeah, I just got like a shipping container and I put my stuff in it and then I shipped it over there and then I moved to Hawaii. And I was like, who just moves to Hawaii? That seems so foreign to me. But as soon as as I realized that was doable, all of a sudden in my head, I'm like, I want to move to Hawaii. So sometimes it takes getting around people who have done the impossible, or if not the impossible, they've done the thing that you haven't even fathomed. Like when you get around other people and you hear their stories, you're listening to podcasts, all of you realize that there's a lot more possible in this world than what our little mini view, like, out our front door tells us. So I learned this and I'm like, oh, great. So then, I mean, like a year later, I'm in Hawaii. I'd moved to Hawaii. But so that was the first thing is, getting around people. And then it's not so hard. In fact, just when I asked him, he's like, yeah, call this shipping company. This is how you move your stuff. There you go. And it was just so easy. A quote I say all the time is like, try to surround yourself with people who make the impossible look like a Tuesday morning. Like, it's just like, that's just like normal, right? Like I love hanging around people that are so fit and in shape, and they make like resisting an Oreo cookie just look like, that's an everyday thing. That's easy. Because like, even though I will probably never be that person, I want to be more of that person every day. So I surround myself with people who just make impossible things just look like, oh yeah, that's just what we do. Yeah, this is what we do. We just buy, for example, if it scares you to buy an apartment complex, get around people who just buy apartment complexes every week. And it's like, also not so scary, because like buying an apartment is just like for me, like raising 20, 30, 40 million dollars is like a Tuesday morning. It's like not a big deal. I'm not bragging. It took a lot of work to get there. But if you want to raise a bunch of capital, go get around people like me and you'll raise a bunch of capital because it becomes real. So that's first story. Second story around that is I came to Maui. I mean, I went to Oahu, couldn't find a property. Couldn't find a neighborhood, didn't like the traffic. I went to another island, Maui, just on a whim on a weekend trip. No plans to move here. And I found this house within an hour of landing. Like I literally didn't know anything about Maui. I just my daughter fell asleep in the car, so we're driving around. We find this house and I stood on the front porch, we call them lanais. Stood on the front lanai and I'm looking at the ocean and I'm looking at the pool, and like it's a 3-unit property, so I could rent out, other units. And I was like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And sometimes in life, like, when we have a clear vision and we've defined what it is we want, we are more able to see it right away, opportunity, because we've defined what it is we want. It's the classic line from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, is it? Like where the Cheshire Cat asks Alice, like, where are you? Or she says, which way do I go? And he's like, well, where do you want to go? And she's like, I don't know. He's like, well, then it doesn't matter. Right. But it does matter. Like if you have a vision of where you want to go, then you can ask better questions of the cat and he'll tell you to go that way. Right. So I had this vision of what I wanted and what I was looking for. So when I saw it, it didn't require a lot of work. I just like, that's it. That's the house I'm going to buy. But then the fear set in. The fear of like, oh, it's a multi-million-dollar house. It's a $1.7 million house. I'd never bought anything over 200,000 before. This is crazy. I can't buy a $1.7 million house. Like the mortgage is $8,000 a month. And so I wasn't going to do it. So I remember vividly calling David Green, the current host of the Biggerpockets podcast. I call him and I'm talking to him about this. And I'm like, man, because he's an agent, he deals with high prices in the Bay Area. And I'm like, dude, this is like, I can't buy this. This is way too much money. He's like, well, I mean, like, do you have the down payment needed? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I have the down payment. And he's like, I mean, and can you afford the monthly payment on it? Like, is it, affordable within your budget? I'm like, well, yeah, it is right now, but things could change and the market could change. He's like, okay, well, could you rent out the downstairs and rent out the other unit? And I'm like, well, yeah, that would be the plan. He's like, well, what does that rent for? And I explained it. And he's like, so you're saying you could live for free in this house in Hawaii? And I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, and if it doesn't work out, you could just move back to Washington and you could rent out your main unit. Now you've got a triplex in Hawaii that's cash flowing for you. And I'm like, yeah. So he's like, let me get this straight. Worst case scenario, you have a multi-million-dollar house in Hawaii that overlooks the ocean that is cash flowing for you. And 30 years from now, is it worth more or less, Brandon, than it is today? And I'm like, oh, it's going to be worth a lot more. It'll probably be worth $4 million down the road in 30 years. He's like, okay, so worst case scenario, you pay this off over 30 years. You've got a $4 million house and you've cash flowed the whole way. And I'm like, yeah, that's not such a worst case scenario. And I love Tim Ferriss talks about this idea of doing a worst case scenario analysis on your life when fear sets in, is run up for worst case scenario. And it ends up being usually not that bad. It's usually reversible. It's usually fixable. The great part about that story, that was 5 years ago. I closed on that property. The property today is worth $4 million. I paid 1.7.
Wow.
Like, it didn't even take 30 years. Now, did I get lucky with the market? Yes, but that just adds one more piece to the equation of when you're buying real estate. It is a very forgiving asset class. So I've got several million in equity now in a property that I could have cash flowed if I wanted to. I mean, I rent out one of the units. I keep one open for family and friends right now. Like I always have friends visiting me. It's a great thing. I love it. I hang out every night with cool people and like, I could have let fear stop me, but I didn't. Because sometimes you just need a friend to tell you you're being stupid and help you overcome that fear. So, end of story.
Man, got me ready to take a leap to Hawaii or something. I might call you and be like, Brandon, what do you think?
last piece about that, though, this is important too, is if your environment where you live is not firing you up and it's not giving you energy, you could stay there and you could change your attitude. I tried for a decade to change my attitude. It was fine. I could have lived in Washington forever. But something about moving to Hawaii fired me up and gave me so much energy and so much passion and whatever you want to call that I started Open Door Capital and I started the Better Life Tribe and I started all the stuff that I don't think I would have done in Washington, because in Washington, I was just worried about how to not get wet because it's raining all the time, right? Wow. So sometimes you got to physically get out of the spot you're in and get to a spot where you can thrive.
Wow. And it's so crazy. I think anybody out there listening, obviously, like even on my book, I wrote take calculated risk, because without risk, you can't ever get anywhere, right? But the thing is, you could calculate everything. Like if you listen to the story you just gave, you calculated every piece of it and it worked out better than you thought, right? Quote unquote, because you had to calculate it. So it's funny, those of you who are listening right now, whatever that next decision is, if you've calculated it, then do it, because at the end, guys, I don't know, there has to be a percentage out there, Brandon, of like, how many times does it work out at the end and even better than what you thought, right? Like I'm sure there's some kind of percentage out there. So take that.
I love it. I love it. There's a great concept known as an asymmetric bet. So an asymmetric bet is something where the upside is much larger than the downside, but the chance of it happening might be about the same. So example is, imagine there was a lottery where the chance of losing your dollar on the ticket is like, 90%. Like, let's say 10% of people who got this lottery ticket, they won, right? Only 10% of people won. It costs you $1 for the ticket. Yeah, there's a 90% chance you're going to lose out on that. But if you win, you get $1,000. That's an asymmetric bet, right? So you might lose $1, you might make 1,000, and the 1,000 is like, so you could buy 10 lottery tickets and it would cost you $10, but one of them gets you 1,000. Make those bets all day long. Like those are the bets. So real estate is an example, right? If you buy a piece of real estate that cash flows, it may not go through the moon, like go to the moon in price. It may not, but it may. But at minimum, you're not losing. It's not like you buy a property for 100 grand and you might lose 100 grand or you might make 100 grand. No, you might lose nothing or you might make 100 grand. It's such an asymmetric bet. And like successful people are making asymmetric bets every day. When you hire an employee might cost you $50,000 a year, but they might make you $500,000. The chance of that, 50-50 in my experience. About half the employees make me like are really, really great and they do exactly what they're going to do and they make me a ton of money. The other half, not so good. So you let them go. And
wow,
it's an asymmetric bet. Like the top people, the billionaires on this planet, they make asymmetric bets all the time, and it pays off over the long run.
Woo! Let's go. I'm fired up. And it's crazy, Brendan. It makes me think of like again, I read it somewhere. Like it's funny. We just take all these things from what we read, right? Like those of you who are listening, that's all we do. We just take things. And it just reminds me of like when there's that airplane getting ready to take off, right? And the throttle has to be at 100% power, right, for it to like lift off. And basically once it's in the air is the only time that you could kind of let go a little bit. And I feel like the decisions that you guys are making is the same way. Just stay 100% committed to those decisions that you make, those risks, right? And I think once you start flying, but I wouldn't let go of the pedal too much, right? Because obviously look at like the stuff that you're doing right now. And with that being said, it leads me to a question that shout out to Teja. I posted her on one of our local real estate groups here. And she wanted me to ask you this question. So what are your extended goals, 5 to 10 years? And what are you doing now on the daily to achieve those?
Great question. So I got two goals on the business front. Open Door Capital, which is our real estate investment company. Like I said, we own almost $1 billion. We're going to buy $10 billion of real estate in the next 10 years. That's the goal there. And so we break that down to the annual, 3-year goals, 1-year goal, quarterly goals, and weekly, just like I talked about earlier. So we're definitely gonna do that. So what do I do? Well, this is interesting when it comes to real estate. And really, when it comes to business in general, I'll approach that a different way. When it comes to real estate, your only real bottleneck in real estate, the only real bottleneck is your ability to raise capital. Here's what I mean by that. If you need more deals, you can find them by going to a larger market, by making more offers, by sending out more direct mail letters, by knocking on more doors. It's all a dial you can turn up and down as you want. So if you want more deals, like most newbies don't realize it, but leads and deals are very much a dial or an educational dial. Like you just learn more, you learn a new skill set, or you add a new piece of knowledge or lead source. You can dial it up. And if you don't think that's true, then I have buddies doing 10, 15, 20 houses a month. How are they doing that? It's not magic. They're in the same markets you're in. It's because they know how to turn the dial. So that is a dial you can turn up and down. Like financing, that's going to be out there no matter what, right? The only real restriction you have or bottleneck is your ability to bring in the money needed to buy these properties. And even that, you could argue there's creative ways to get around it, like subject to or, seller financing, all that. But really, it's the ability to raise capital. Therefore, if my goal is to buy $10 billion of real estate over the next 10 years, the one thing that I can do better than everyone else on my team, my specialty, my unique ability, is my ability to reach people. So I go on podcasts. I send a newsletter. I have a text message newsletter that goes out to 50,000 people, something like that. I don't do that just for fun. I mean, yes, it's fun, but I do it because the more people who know, like, and trust me, the more people will put money into my company, Open Door Capital. Now, on the other side, the other goal, on the Better Life Tribe side, we have 1,000. We launched a few months ago. We have 1,000 members in that group right now. Again, that's 100% of profits go to charity. Within 3 years from now, I don't have a 10-year. Well, I kind of have a 10-year goal, but the 3-year goal that I have for that one is to have 10,000 members. Technically, the 10-year goal is to have 100,000 members in it. But 10,000 members at the profit we think we can bring in per person ends up being about $50 million per year in profit. That's crazy. And all that's going out to charities. So that's my goal in 3 years. In 10 years, it would be, it's closer to I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars every year, which is exciting. So those are kind of my two goals on the business front. And then I've got some goals, personal stuff, and I want my kids to be not dirt bags and all that. But yeah.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. And my next question that I have for you, Brandon, is what is happiness to you? What does that mean? And joy, happiness, just all that. How would you define it? And how do you make sure that you're happy?
That's a good question. I've got friends who absolutely love to jump on a 4-wheeler and just spin around in a circle. And they're just woo, and they're having so much fun. And I love watching them do that. And they're very happy. I don't enjoy, I'm sure I would be happy if I were to suddenly jump in there, right, and go fly on. But that's not what drives me. It's almost happy. Instead of happiness, it's growth. Happiness is doing something hard and trying to achieve something better than what I had before. And so that's a big piece of it, is just this idea of that's a mountain. I'm going to go climb that. And then I'm going to do a better job climbing the mountain next time. So I'm not a super party it up, have fun, laugh kind of happiness, but I get a lot of fulfillment out of things. That sounds like I'm a really boring person. I think I do have a pretty good sense of humor and I laugh a lot, but that's not, I try not to focus on that. I focus on things that are more impactful. The funnest thing I can think about doing is watching a movie with my wife, watching Netflix, or sitting on the front porch of my house with my lanai, drinking a glass of whiskey with a good buddy who's super smart. And we chat till 2 a.m. about, I don't know, literature or politics or something. That sounds great. That's fun to me. And that's where I get a lot of joy and happiness. And yeah.
Love it. And with to kind of add on to that question, how do you make sure that you get your work done, but at the same time enjoy life, right? Because I think some people forget once they get on that hustle mode. And it's funny because the hustle, to me, it's now I hustle to inspire, right? Is what I like to say, meaning that I could literally just stop and the music I released, it'll just grow on itself, and an old song will just pay me forever. I wrote a book and I don't have to write another one. And at least this is on my level, the real estate that we have. But I feel there's a sense of I feel you start dying if you just literally just drop. And so you still have to hustle, but I think there's like a whole other level. So with that being said, what's your mentality behind that?
Yeah, for me, the idea of hustle versus enjoyment in life, right? I mean, first of all, I love hustling. I love making business and all that stuff. But if you hustle all the time, you don't have time for like usually more meaningful things like kids, family, wife, whatever. So I'm a big believer in the concept that a lot of business books have talked about this, and that is this idea of the rocks in the jar. If you have a jar and you fill it with sand, like, and sand represents all like the little things you have to do through a given day, you're left with nothing. Like, you can't put the rocks in the more important things, which would be like family, your health, like things that bring you joy, reading, maybe like those big and really important things. Oftentimes they get left out of the jar because we fill it with sand. But if you put the big rocks in first, they fill your jar, then you can pour sand around them. And the way that looks practically is that I schedule time. The first priority of my week, the scheduling, goes to, when am I doing date night with my wife? When's my like power hour, like my miracle morning, like every morning? Do I have time set aside for that? When am I going to do a date with my kids? Like each, I'm going to go take them out separately. When am I going to have time for my friends to go golf with them, which I rarely do, but I did yesterday for the first time in forever. Like, I try to schedule those things, and then my team can like fill all around that if they want to, right? That's fine. But I schedule the rocks, and that way I can still make sure I get the things that bring me fulfillment and joy in life and the things that matter, but the work still gets done. Parkinson's law says work expands to fill the time allotted. If I have an 8-hour day and I just like, okay, I'm just going to go work, I'll work all 8 hours. But if I have an 8-hour day with a 2-hour lunch with my wife in the middle of it, guess what? I'm going to get the exact same amount of work done, but I got a 2-hour lunch with my wife. And that's that analogy of the rocks and the jar. And it's made a monumental impact on my life.
I love that. It's funny. I just had Carlos Reyes on the podcast, and it just reminded me that and now more than ever, I like scheduling everything around the important things, right? And it sounds like that's what you got going on, obviously. So yeah, those of you who are listening, don't forget that why you started this whole thing. Why are you on this journey, on this crazy journey that we're on, right? Like, it's for the family and to put our time. With that being said, once you are on your deathbed, Brandon, what is the most thing that you're proud of right now? Well, I shouldn't say right now. Whoa, that was not right now.
Assuming I'm on my death, yeah. I got you, man.
You
I got you. Let's pretend for a moment I'm 90 years old. I'm sitting on my deathbed. What am I looking back on proud of? Man, it's a couple things. One, that my kids aren't dirtbags, right? And when I mean that they're compassionate, they're kind, they're God-fearing. They have that money is not the only thing to them, that they respect one another, they love one another. So like my kids, and that their kids are that way as well, and maybe their kids, right? Like that generationally, I made a positive impact on my family. That's the number one thing I'm proud of. Number two would be my Porsche. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. But yeah, family. That's it.
Love it. And that was funny.
I don't have a
still
Porsche
thinking like, not yet.
Not yet. I have a Tesla. I have a couple Teslas, but no Porsches. So.
Love it. So what's the future like? I know you talked about that, but you had mentioned that you might even change the name of the Open Door Capital. Like, is that still in the works? And you mentioned you might have a podcast coming up soon too.
That I do. Both those are in the works. Yeah. Open Door Capital is a great name, but it doesn't really mean all that much. Like, what? I have an open door policy for my employees. I mean, it means like, I don't know. I started 20 years ago almost, or 17 years ago with Open Door Properties. And it was, since then, there was a large, gigantic real estate billion-dollar company called Open Door that has come into the world. And it's just, people get confused too often. So we're going to change the name to Better Life Capital. I don't know what date that happens. Anytime in the next few weeks, it's supposed to happen. But I own the Better Life Tribe. Like, I run that. So we might as well have Better Life Capital and the Better Life Tribe. And it'll be called A Better Life Podcast with Brandon Turner, or A Better Life with Brandon Turner. That'll be launching here end of March, hopefully. And I love this concept. I like real estate, but I love an intentionally lived life, right? I love when people realize that they control their future, at least a large component of it, and that they can drive their life to incredible destinations and create for themselves a better life. And it all comes down to those little things that we do, the little 5-minute tasks, the words of affirmation spoken to our spouse. It's the hour in the gym. It's the sitting down and reading a real estate book and then putting one thing into practice. Those little things lead to an incredible life. And that's why this idea of a better life is so central to everything that I do today.
Love it. And I know that I asked you about the podcast you got coming, because obviously you did your Biggerpockets time, right? And in between there, I know you took like a year off, and how was that experience like? Because I can't remember where you mentioned, it might have been on even just your social media, where you kind of mentioned how obviously you can't go wrong spending time with your family, but there was this like feeling of like you needed to do something else. Is that, am I accurate?
So I quit the Biggerpockets podcast in December of 2021. And I got some advice from my performance coach, Jason Dries. And Jason said to me, he's like, Brandon, I know you. I know that on day one, you're going to have a million ideas. You're going to go start, go run off and go take care of all of them. And they'll probably be successful. But he said, my encouragement for you would be to not make a decision, to not make any big decision. Let it marinate and sit there for a while and take time, maybe a year, to just think about the future and not just react, because sometimes the better stuff comes later. And it was such great advice. And I took it, and for a whole year, I did nothing. I traveled around the country, then went over to Europe for a while. I hung out with my family a lot. I surfed some. I went to a lot of conferences and some speaking gigs, but I didn't make a solid decision on what next year looks like until that year was done. And I'm so thankful that I did, because that, I did. It was super hard, by the way. It was super hard because I am the kind of guy that's like, I had 50 million ideas and I would just run with one. But sometimes you got to just let something sit and think about it and marinate on it. And it drifted from, I'm going to make this big multi-billion-dollar education company that's going to get me a private jet, to I'm going to give away $1 billion to fight human trafficking. That the process is going to look very similar. The Better Life Tribe is that avenue. But what happened over the year was my heart changed onto why I was doing it. And I think that actually is going to make the biggest difference and make it a whole lot easier. So sometimes it's good to just sit on things and marinate for a little while.
We'll be right back. Before we continue, go subscribe to Billy the Kid YouTube. That is Billy, DHAKID. Also, go follow Billy the Kid Music on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, and everywhere else music is available. And now, back to this great episode. Let's go.
Hopping out the two, though, we're number 2, foe. Feel like Kobe, though I'm winning, need to do more. My mama sorry, college wasn't for me. Street smart, no degree, just like Kobe. Self-made boss with a suit like a mogul. I'm the new era, you see it on my logo.
We're going to start wrapping things up here soon. I know you got big buildings to go by and all the big things that you're doing.
I got social media videos to make, man. Come on. I'm lame like that.
Love it. What's like, if you had to come up with like 5 things to do to be the best husband, and not just husband, because ladies listening, just marriage overall, what are like the 5 tips you would give somebody for a good marriage?
Ooh, great question. All right, so I'm far from a perfect husband, but here's a few tips that I've got for being a good husband/wife. First thing is this. Most people think of marriage as 50-50. Like, I'm going to meet you in the middle. We're going to each give halfway. But the problem with that is, as soon as one person is not feeling fully up to it, they feel like they're at like 49%. What do you have? You have a gap. You have a gap in your marriage, and there's a hole. And then the other person can try to give more, but like it gets weird. And then like, you owe me, and there's a lot of that. Some advice I got early on in my career, or my marriage, both, I guess, was don't give 50%, give 100%. Always. Like, no matter what they do, you take full ownership of you and your part of the marriage as a 100%er. So when you give 100%, and that's your goal all the time, whether they're feeling it, whether they're kind to you, whether they're in the mood, doesn't matter. You give 100%. If they're only at 49%, you still have a perfect marriage. You still have 100% because you're overlapping. And the magic is that when you give 100%, they naturally want to give 100% as well. So that idea is not always easy, but I try to remember that every day. I mean, I probably think that every single day is, am I giving 100%? The second thing I would argue is, like, they say kids spell love Time, but so does your spouse. Like, to show, yes, you can show love, and everyone has like their love language and stuff. But at the end of the day, like, if you're not giving time to your spouse, you're not loving them the way that they need to be loved. And so just scheduling those date nights, scheduling that time is vital. And on a related note, a third tip would be plan your future together. I don't care if your spouse is not into this whole personal development crap or the real estate thing or the business or entrepreneurship. It doesn't matter. Get their input and work together, whether it's an annual goal setting retreat, like I host one every year, whether it's just you guys go out to the beach for a while, whatever, like take time to say, what do we want from our life? There's some beauty in, there's beauty in the idea of forming your life together that draws you together. It just cements you together in a way that you wouldn't believe until you do it. Fourth tip is this, and I heard this a long time ago, and maybe it's a cheesy metaphor, but this idea of like a perfect marriage is one where both people are pursuing their spiritual life, which is almost like, think of a triangle, right? Guy, one person on one side, one person on the other. And if you both are pursuing a spiritual life, and in my case, I'm a Christian guy, so I'm like, if I'm pursuing God personally, trying to better my personal spiritual interior, and my wife is doing the same, we will move toward each other in like the same way that two sides of a triangle move towards each other as they go up. That concept of, I don't need to fix them, I'm going to work on me, and they're going to work on them, on these more spiritual or mental or mindset things. And there's ways I can help and she can help me. But yeah, that moves towards God. The closer we get to God, the closer we get to each other. And then lastly, get counseling. I've not been good at this, but there have been numerous times where I've had like problems or arguments in my marriage where I'm like, this would have been solved a long time ago had we just sat down with a counselor once a month and talked to somebody. In fact, I got some advice from a really famous entrepreneur one time. I was sitting talking to him and his girl, and they said the day they started dating, they went to counseling, and they have not stopped. Every week they do counseling, and they've never had a fight because they preempt everything. It's like, imagine you run a business and you don't work on your business until it's falling apart. You don't read a business book until it's falling apart. You don't go get a consultant until it's in the hole. We never do that. We always hire consultants to help us get to the next level. As a married couple, why don't we do that more often? Why don't we, or in relationship, why don't we preemptively improve our relationship by hiring people to help us, by going to the conferences and reading the books? And so treat your marriage a little bit more like you would treat a successful business. And I think you'll have a much more successful marriage.
Wow. And one last question before I ask you the last questions. I keep saying that. 5 more questions. No, I'm sorry. So what would you say, what are the percentages that you try to live by with your money, as far as like, and I know it's pretty just in general, obviously you don't have to get into detail, but 10% is for this, 20% is for that, 50% for this. Like how do you determine your budgeting nowadays?
That's a good question. I'll admit that I'm not great at this. I used to be much better at it, and then I started making so much more money than I was spending that I just kind of lost it. And that's actually a dangerous thing. I should actually be more rigid than I am. But generally, I went through a phase where I was like this early in my career, like we were making no money hardly at all. The real estate was tough. My wife was working at Starbucks, and we were just going deeper and deeper in credit card debt every month, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I read Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, and we switched to a full envelope budget where everything was cash and we had an envelope for everything, just strict budgeting. And that all of a sudden overnight, we went from losing $1,000 a month and going negative to having an extra $1,000 a month to pay off debt. That was crazy. And we didn't change anything other than just watching where our money goes. So the very act of watching it makes you better in control of your money. So that was a big piece of it. And so then for years, we just operated on that budget. But again, like just life got crazy with income over the last few years, especially with all book royalties. And so I started making all this money, and I lost a lot of that. And it's something that I've been working on the last few days, especially my wife and I have been talking about. We should really get back to that. But to give you a more general idea today, we try to give away at least 10% of our income towards charity stuff, towards like church ministry stuff, things like that. I'd like to crank that up, especially with the Better Life Tribe coming. I mean, if you technically consider that all my money and then I'm donating it all, I'm going to be like 90% given away pretty soon, which is cool. But I'm just going to give away millions and millions of dollars every year.
Wow.
Which is awesome.
That's awesome. That's like massive.
It's cool, man.
And it's just crazy the way you just said it. Like, cause I understand what you were doing. I understood what you were doing, but now you're literally like, no, it's like 90%. Obviously you got to maintain the house, but wow.
Yeah. I need to have money to live. And honestly, I got to figure that out at some point. Like, I make money right now and I make really good money, but, like I give away a lot. Like the tribe, I don't make a lot of money on, and the real estate side, I wait until the end. So I mean, I make money on book royalties. I get money from cash flow from deals. Maybe at some point I'll start a tech company or something like that makes money. Like, I'm not worried about it. Like I said, I got a pretty abundant mindset and I make enough right now to survive. But yeah, I do that. My housing, I got 2 houses that are both multi-million-dollar houses. That's a lot of expense. But like I house hack one of them. The other one, we're going to start Airbnb, or not Airbnb, but we're going to start renting out to people for like month-on-month stuff. It's a kind of a vacation house. So yeah. Yeah, and I have 1 truck payment. I bought a truck. I could pay it off, but I just haven't yet. But I own like 4 other cars that are all paid off. I try to have as little debt as possible. I don't carry debt anymore other than mortgages and that 1 truck that I should just pay it off. I've just been lazy, but that's how I do it.
And you mentioned at the beginning abundance, and you just said it again. And actually, it's funny. My word of the year this year is abundance. So
nice, yeah.
How can what's your take on abundance?
Yeah, it's like a water. I think of money as a waterfall. There's trillions of dollars transacting every day in the world. Trillions of dollars all over the place. People are getting wealthy. People are losing it. People are buying stuff, and new inventions are made and new technologies. Money is a giant waterfall. And once you realize that it's not a little trickle coming down the mountain that you can't find, it's a waterfall. You stick your cup in and get some water and pull it back up again whenever you need to. And an abundant mentality is one that recognizes it. It's your eyes are open and you see there is so much money out there. Now, do I believe that some people have it easier than others? 100%. Is there a privilege? 100%. Do I have an easier time? Yes. That said, it doesn't give anybody an excuse not to try to better their life and to be able to open their eyes and see the opportunities that exist out there, because they do exist out there. There's so many problems. I mean, let's just use an entrepreneurial thing. There's so many problems left in the world that need to be solved, even silly things, right? I mean, I'll give you like stupid example, right? Like the fact that like this mug is sitting here right now and it's from 2 days ago coffee. There's some junk inside there. That's just an irritation. Could somebody invent something, I don't know what, that would have cleaned this mug so that the bugs aren't getting in it while I'm in my office? And I don't know. It's a silly idea, right? But notice I just took a problem that I saw in front of me. And now you can invent a solution to that problem, and all of a sudden, boom, you have millions of dollars. As what's his name? Mark Cuban once said, the great thing about business is you only have to get it right once. Like you can try something and it doesn't work. You try it again, it doesn't work. You try it again, it doesn't work. You try it again, it makes you $1 million. You're set for life. Boom.
Wow.
You only got to be right once, and you get better every time you try. So that's an abundance mentality.
I love it. Love it. Love it. And so I'm going to ask you 3 questions just to wrap everything up, Brendan. What's the best piece of, or what, looking back at your younger self, what would be the best piece of advice you would give yourself now?
Journal every morning, and not necessarily like, like today I went to the bank, but like plan your day, write down your goals, write down your habits, track them, track those little things. It matters. If you do that over long haul, you get the results of what you repeatedly do.
Wow. I love that. And that was fast too. And so the $1 Million Hustle, as I explained it, is like, what does it take to get to that level mentally? So what are 3 habits or 3 ways and if you were to tell somebody, hey, if you do these 3 things, you're not going to fail, you're going to be super successful, you're going to get to your $1 Million Hustle, what are the 3 things?
Yeah, surround yourself with people who make it look easy. So join groups, pay for it if you have to, but get around people who already have that millionaire mentality. Number 2, find out what those people do. Like drill into like, what are the day-to-day things that they do? What are the actions that they're actually doing? Because like you can have the right mindset, but yeah, mindset has to be coupled with action. So what are those people doing? How do they run their life? That's why podcasts are amazing. You can listen to how people run their life. And then 3rd, do those things. That's it. Like it's like the simplest thing in the world. Find somebody who's doing it. Like find somebody who has the life you want. Find out what they're doing and what they did, and then just do that. Those 3 things, you'll have anything you want.
Wow. Woo. And then all the books you've written, is there one that you could give us that you're writing right now that's going to come soon?
Oh, yeah. I've written like, I don't know, 5 or 6 at this point. Like half of one I wrote with my wife. So I don't know, it's 5 or 6, and a journal is in there. And
5.5.
I am slowly working. I don't like to say I'm working on a book right now because I'm really not. This is a lesson right here. The reason I say I'm not working on a book, I do have a book that I have an idea for, and I'm like 2 chapters into it, but I wrote those 2 chapters 6 months ago. And I think about it a lot. I talk about it a lot. I plan it. I'm not writing every day. And if I was truly, so this is a lesson, right? I'm not writing every day. Therefore, I'm not writing a book. If you're not analyzing deals every day and making offers and talking with real estate agents and going to meetups every single day or every single week, and you have the process for that, if you're not doing that, you're not a real estate investor.
Wow.
You're a wannabe. You're a wisher, right? So you need, like, are you putting in the work daily needing to do it? So am I writing a book? No. Do I want to write a book? Yes. So I'm not going to trick myself into believing I'm writing a book right now. I'm going to say I have plans to write a book, and I'm slowly playing with the idea. And until I'm committed to it, until I've burdened my ships and I've jumped in and I've got a writing number, how many words am I going to write every day and what time every day am I going to write, and I show up every day and I write, that's when I become a writer again. And I would urge everyone who's listening to this to ask themselves about your ambitions. Are they ambitions or are they goals? Are they wants or are they, I'm going to do this? And your actions will tell you the truth.
Wow. Whew, I'm ready to go do something right now, Brandon. Run through this drywall or something. Love it. Where can people find you?
Yeah, Beardy Brandon on Instagram, social media, TikTok, all that stuff. Beard with a Y at the end, Brandon, Beardy Brandon, because if you're not watching this, you can hear my voice, but you don't know I have a homeless looking beard. And beardybrandon.com is my text message newsletter. If you want to join that, it's a newsletter called Behind the Beard. It's just books that I'm reading, real estate questions I can answer, and just other pieces of advice and life stuff.
Love it. And we had a few questions submitted, but I couldn't ask all of them. But one that I want to ask you is with Biggerpockets, like the people want to know what's going on. What's the update? How's David Green?
Yeah, they're cranking. I mean, I barely am involved anymore. I mean, I talk to Scott occasionally. I talk to Josh. I talk to David Green a lot. In fact, we're hanging out in 2 days. We're gonna go, chill in LA for a little bit. But they're just killing it. Biggerpockets understands this concept that I'm getting better and better at, and Josh understood better than anybody else I've ever known. And that is, when you have the eyeballs, you have everything. You can do whatever you want. Mr. Beast is a good example of this, right? Or Kylie Jenner. When you have eyeballs, when you have reach, even a mediocre idea with mediocre execution can do phenomenally well.
Wow.
And so if there's one piece of advice also I'd give my younger self, another piece of advice would be get your reach up. Get good at communication. Get good at building your email list. Like, be able to, if the more people who know, like, and trust you, the better business you can have. That's why Mr. Beast launched a burger chain to be one of the biggest burger chains in America, and it took him like 6 months. It's not because he's good at, I doubt they taste good. I don't know. I haven't had one. It's not because he's a great businessman. It's not because he's got a great burger or a great recipe. It's because he's got 1 billion people who know who he is. And you can do anything when you have that.
Love it, Brendan. Well, we have come to the end. Thank you for your time. I truly appreciate it, and everything that you do. Keep doing it. I'm right. Whatever you need, I'm here.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you. You're a phenomenal host, so thank you.
Thank you. And those of you who are listening, make sure you guys screenshot where you're listening and tag Brendan, tag me, and we're going to reshare it so that way we could all get followers. So with that being said, I'll see you guys on the next one. Vamonos.
Go. Different levels of thinking and we both, right? But my mindset is on growth with the future, right? Close-minded people mad at me that I'm speaking facts. Or maybe could it be that I'm getting racks? Open your mind, gotta open it to receive. I'm always 10 toes for what I believe. Close-minded people mad at me that I'm speaking facts. Or maybe could it be that I'm getting racks? Open your mind, gotta open it to receive. I'm always 10 toes for what I believe. I've heard it all, this and that, and I got an ego. Y'all pigeons, I don't flock together.